Hello, YouTube. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to the C-Files. The question is, how was the United States government funded before the income tax existed? You see, the income tax did not exist before 1913. The income tax was brought in to pay for the debt that occurred after the Civil War. And the purpose of the income tax was to be a temporary tax, and was to be eliminated once the war was paid for. The great debt that the United States incurred during that war. You see, the international bankers came in and they told the U.S. Congress, we can pay for your debt. We can pay the crushing debt that war created if you'll just let us lend you the money. But there's always a cost to lending the money, and that is the interest that has to be paid on the debt. The income tax was implemented in 1913, and we have been paying on debts that we owe the Federal Reserve and international bankers and other countries that lend money. And we spent a lot of money rebuilding a lot of countries after war times. And we've been paying on it ever since. Since 1913, the American people have been burdened with the income tax, with heavy interest on debt that has plagued this nation. So before 1913, how did they handle that? If they did not have an income tax to build revenue for the federal government before 1913, how in the world did they pay for the federal government? Well, ladies and gentlemen, the answer is they did it through tariffs, and they did it through excise taxes and duties on certain goods. So excise taxes are like a sales tax on certain goods. That's how they did it. And what was the most prosperous period in the United States in its history? Well, that can be debated. Some would say between 1933 and 1970, because there was some surpluses in the budget during those periods, about 5 different periods of surpluses, and we were able to pay for a whole lot of stuff. The problem is we carried a lot of debt, and so I would disagree with that. The period of 1835 and 1836, Andrew Jackson's presidency. There was a period when we had zero debt and we had a surplus. That was the most prosperous time that the United States had. Matter of fact, we had such a surplus that they didn't know what to do with all the money, and they gave some of it back to the American people. Well, what happened? What did Andrew Jackson do? He took down the central bank, what we would call a Federal Reserve today. Back then it was called a different name, but it was the same as the Federal Reserve today. It was a central bank, a private bank that handled our interest rates and printed our money. He took that down and returned the responsibility back to Congress and printed U.S. currency, not Federal Reserve currency or that bank's currency. And there were no income tax. And that was the most prosperous time of the United States. Maybe we could learn something from Andrew Jackson.